in the flickering shadows of silent cinema, one figure emerged from the darkness of poverty to illuminate the hearts of millions. His name was Charles Spencer Chaplin, but the world would know him simply as Charlie. This is the story of a man who taught us to laugh through tears, who found humanity in the midst of industrial madness, and who proved that sometimes the greatest truths are spoken without words. London, 1889. The gaslit streets of Kennington echoed with the cries of street vendors and the clip-clop of horse-drawn carriages. But in the cramped rooms of a boarding house, a different kind of drama was unfolding. Hannah Chaplin, a music hall performer whose voice was failing, clutched her newborn son. Charles Chaplin Sr., a baritone singer battling his own demons with alcohol, would soon abandon them both. Little Charlie was born not just into poverty, but into a world where survival meant performing. By the age of 5, Charlie had already tasted the bitter sweetness of the stage. When his mother's voice cracked during a performance, the theater manager pushed the small boy onto the stage. The audience, initially hostile, fell silent as this tiny figure began to sing. "Jack Jones," he sang, his child's voice carrying across the theater. But it was what happened next that would define his entire life. When the audience began throwing coins onto the stage, little Charlie stopped singing and began collecting them, one by one, examining each coin with the curiosity of a scientist. The audience erupted in laughter. In that moment, Charlie Chaplin discovered something profound, that humor could transform pain into joy, that a simple gesture could speak louder than any word. But childhood for Charlie was no fairy tale. His mother, Hannah, battled mental illness, drifting in and out of asylums. His father, when present, was lost in bottles of gin. Charlie and his half-brother Sidney found themselves in workhouses, those grim Victorian institutions where the poor were warehoused like forgotten furniture. The workhouse was a place where laughter was forbidden, where children were numbers, not names. Yet even here, Charlie found ways to make others smile. He would mimic the stern headmaster behind his back, creating elaborate pantomimes that had the other boys stifling their giggles. Years passed like pages in a sad book. Charlie worked as a newsboy, selling papers on the street corners of London. He shined shoes, swept floors, and learned that dignity wasn't something you were born with. It was something you had to create for yourself, one small act at a time. At 14, Charlie made a decision that would change everything. He joined Fred Carnot's comedy troupe, a traveling vaudeville company that toured the music halls of Britain. Here, he learned the art of physical comedy, the power of timing, and most importantly, how to make people forget their troubles, if only for a moment. The young man who had once collected coins from a theater floor was now earning them through his craft. But Charlie dreamed of something bigger. Across the Atlantic, a new form of entertainment was being born, moving pictures. And in 1913, that dream called him to America. New York Harbor, 1913. As the ship carrying Charlie Chaplin approached the Statue of Liberty, he stood at the rail, a young man of 24, with nothing but talent and an unshakable belief in the power of laughter. Hollywood was still a dusty collection of orange groves and small studios, but it pulsed with possibility. Charlie signed with Keystone Studios, home of the frantic Keystone Cops and their slapstick comedies. But the director, Max Sennett, wasn't impressed with this quiet Englishman who seemed to think too much. "Make it funny," Sennett would shout. "Just make it funny." But Charlie had different ideas about comedy. He believed that laughter should have a soul, that beneath every joke should beat a human heart. His breakthrough came when he was told to find a costume for a character in a film called Kid Auto Races at Venice. Walking through the studio wardrobe, Charlie began assembling a character piece by piece. Oversized shoes from Ford Sterling, tight coat from Fatty Arbuckle, baggy pants from someone else entirely, a dirty hat that was too small, and a bamboo cane that seemed to have a life of its own. But it was when Charlie added the toothbrush mustache that the magic happened. He looked in the mirror and saw not just a costume, but a person, a little man with big dreams, a tramp who carried himself with the dignity of a duke. This character was Charlie's masterpiece, a man who had nothing but gave everything. He was the immigrant, the outsider, the dreamer who refused to let the world crush his spirit. In a bowler hat and torn coat, he was somehow more elegant than any millionaire. The tramp had a peculiar walk, a duck-like waddle that made children giggle and adults remember what it felt like to be young. He could convey more emotion with the tip of his cane than most actors could with pages of dialogue. Films poured out of Charlie like water from a spring. The Kid, The Gold Rush, City Lights, Modern Times. Each one was a small miracle, a perfect balance of comedy and pathos. Charlie didn't just make movies, he crafted dreams. But success brought its own challenges. Charlie was a perfectionist, shooting scenes dozens of times until they achieved the exact emotion he sought. He would spend hours working on a single gesture, a momentary expression, the precise angle of his hat. "I am not a comedian," he would tell reporters. "I am a storyteller who happens to make people laugh." In The Kid, Charlie found and directed a young boy named Jackie Coogan. The film told the story of the tramp raising an abandoned child, and in every scene, Charlie poured his own childhood loneliness and longing. When the authorities come to take the boy away, the tramp's anguish was so real that audiences wept openly in theaters. A gold rush showed the tramp as a prospector in Alaska, turning a boiled leather shoe into a gourmet meal, finding humanity in the harshest conditions. In one unforgettable scene, dinner rolls become dancing feet, and a simple meal becomes a ballet. but it was City Lights that many consider his masterpiece. The story of the tramp's love for a blind flower girl combined everything Charlie believed about cinema. And it could make us laugh, cry, and most importantly, feel less alone in the world. The final scene of City Lights, when the flower girl, her sight restored, recognizes the tramp as her benefactor, remains one of cinema's most powerful moments. Charlie's face, a mixture of hope and fear, joy and sorrow, said everything that words never could. By the 1930s, Charlie Chaplin was more than famous. He was a phenomenon. His films played in palaces and poverty-stricken neighborhoods alike. Kings and commoners spoke his name with equal reverence. But with fame came scrutiny, and with scrutiny came pain. The world was changing. Talkies, films with sound, were taking over Hollywood. Studios pressured Charlie to make the tramp speak, but he resisted. He understood that the tramp's power lay in his universality. He belonged to everyone because he spoke to everyone, without the barrier of language. But Charlie had things to say, and in The Great Dictator, he finally broke his silence. In his first talking picture, he played both a Jewish barber and a Hitler-like dictator, creating a savage satire of fascism. The film ended with Charlie himself, out of character, speaking directly to the camera in a passionate plea for humanity and tolerance. "We think too much and feel too little," he said, his voice carrying the weight of his convictions. "More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness and gentleness." The speech was Charlie's artistic and moral manifesto, but it also marked the beginning of his troubles in America. The political climate was shifting, and Charlie's leftist sympathies, his criticism of capitalism, his calls for peace and understanding, made him a target. The FBI began investigating him. Newspapers called him a communist. Politicians demanded his deportation. The man who had given America so much laughter was now seen as a threat to American values. Personal scandals erupted. Charlie's relationships with younger women became tabloid fodder. Paternity suits were filed. His reputation, so carefully built over decades, crumbled in a matter of months. In 1947, Charlie sailed to England for the London premiere of Limelight, his most autobiographical film. While at sea, he received word that his re-entry permit to the United States had been revoked. He was, in effect, exiled from the country that had made him a star. The pain of exile cut deep. America had been more than a home to Charlie. It had been the place where his dreams came true, where the little tramp was born, where he learned that laughter was a universal language. But Charlie was resilient. He settled in Switzerland with his wife Una and their growing family. He continued making films, though they reached smaller audiences. A King in New York was his bitter response to American politics, while A Countess from Hong Kong would be his final film. The years in Switzerland were quieter but not unhappy. Charlie found peace in the mountains, surrounded by his children, finally experiencing the stable family life that had eluded him as a child. He wrote his memoirs, composed music, and watched as the world slowly recognized what it had lost. In 1972, after 25 years of exile, Charlie returned to America to accept an honorary Academy Award. As he walked onto the stage, the entire audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation that lasted 12 minutes, the longest in Oscar history. The old man, now white-haired and frail, stood before the microphone with tears in his eyes. The little tramp had come home. A sad day. Charlie Chaplin died on Christmas Day, 1977, at his home in Switzerland. He was 88 years old, a man who had lived through 2 world wars, the birth of cinema, and the transformation of the world itself. But the little tramp lives on. In every film festival, in every comedy club, in every moment when someone chooses to laugh instead of cry, the tramp's spirit endures. Charlie once said, "A day without laughter is a day wasted." He gave the world a gift that keeps giving, the understanding that humor is not just entertainment, but a form of love. That laughter is not just a response to comedy, but a declaration of hope. The boy who collected coins from a theater floor became the man who collected hearts from around the world. He proved that sometimes the smallest person can cast the longest shadow, and that the simplest truth is often the most profound. In his song Smile, Charlie wrote, "Smile though your heart is aching, smile even though it's breaking." These words, like the man who wrote them, remind us that even in our darkest moments, we have the power to choose joy. The little tramp may have disappeared from our screens, but his message remains. We are all connected by our humanity, our struggles, our dreams, and our capacity to find light in the darkness. Charlie Chaplin, the tramp who taught the world to smile. Thanks for watching. Sweet dreams.